our legend, celebrating the successes here of so many wonderful people in pest and vector control. So today it is my pleasure and honor to be here with Dr. Austin Frishman, as everyone knows him as Doc Frishman. And so he has been in this business for over 60 years and has done so much for our pest control and vector control industry. So I'm going to turn the camera here and introduce Dr. Frishman. All right, Dr. Frishman, got you. Welcome so much. Thank you for inviting us into your home, into your beautiful office to talk a little bit about the things that you've done in your career and continue to do, I would say. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. And I think, one of the things that everyone is always interested about, and Stacey, if you could just go to the next slide. In this series, it's really about you, right? It's about, and of course, we're going to talk about where you went to school and all these good things, but let us know a little bit about your early years, Dr. Frishman.
Well, first, I was born in 1940.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get a perspective of it, 1940, a house cost $3,900. Okay. The Dow Jones average was about 134.
Wow.
All right, so it gives you an idea of the completely different thing now. The photo on the left is me with blonde hair. And I had those blonde hairs until I went to school. That's chicken farm, and that's our chicken farm. And I grew up in an area. Some people call it a poverty area. You don't know it's a poverty area until you leave and somebody tells you that.
Right.
But we had this small maybe 800 chickens or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the people around us had chicken farms too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that first picture. And there was a lady that was a friend of my mother's that picture is taken with. The second picture is I'm on a patio, and you notice the grass is not cut.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody had a fancy lawn or anything like that. And it was in a rural area. And so at that time, I was the only child, and my mother dressed me up in a sailor suit, and I had to stay on that patio, okay? And then the one on the right is, I don't know, I was about 7 years old, and by that time, I was really into insects.
Mm-hmm.
I had praying mantises on sticks with a rope tied around them, and they couldn't get to each other.
Nice. So did your love for insects start? Obviously, if it was 7 years old, you're already doing that. So it must have started when you were really young.
Really
young.
Yeah. I mean, and I like turtles and frogs and that kind of stuff. But to give you an idea, I went to the doctor. About that age, 7 years old. And it's a small town. And the doctor has a strange name, Dr. Payne, but he's a great guy. And he says to me, he gives me a jar in a paper bag, and he says, tell your mother I need a specimen. So I knew what a specimen was. I did not tell my mother. I went out, I collected an insect, I put it in the jar, brought it back to the nurse there. This nurse left it in the paper bag and went home. He called the house hysterical, So that's.
I'm sure that was a first and a last that happened to
that was that now as a kid, I used to diagnose insect problems. Okay. So my first diagnosis, I grew up with a cousin as a name of Little Austin, that was Big Austin. I'll tell you how I got that name. But anyway, he had a bumblebee land on his nose, and we had like 5 acres of property there, and they're near a little stream, and it landed on his nose. He was bent over. We were catching little salamanders, And on all my authority, I said, little Austin, don't move. And it won't sting you. And he squatted, he shut his eye there. It stung him.
Oh, no.
He went screaming through the woods. You're wrong, you're wrong. I said, boy, I guess I got more to learn.
A little bit. And so this is in upstate New York?
Yes,
Where-
which is really downstate, but compared to New York City, it's
Right.
near the Pennsylvania
Okay.
border,
All right.
halfway between Binghamton and New York City.
Excellent. And so tell us a little bit about your name. How did you get your name? Is that?
Well, okay, I'm firstborn American,
Uh-huh.
and my mom was really small. She weighed about 92 pounds, 94 pounds with me. And so they had to go to the doctor in New York City when I was born. I get born and the doctor says to my mother, no, they're telling me this, I don't remember it, but what are you gonna name him? She says, Asniel Ben Mordecai. He says, you can't do that. This is America. Why are you naming him that? She said, because it's named after her mother who had passed away was Asna. So he says, oh, a good American name, Austin. And she said, who's Austin? He says, Stephen Austin from Texas. Okay. That's how I got my name.
You know, that's an interesting story, but I think so common in that so many of these first, you know, folk immigrants that came, right? I come from an immigrant family, but my name is very common elsewhere, but just sort of that assimilation right into the United States. So yeah, super interesting story. That's great. So I think we're going to go to the next slide that talks a little bit more about your early years. See, Stacy, you want to go ahead and move it to the next set? There we go.
Yeah.
So I think this talks a little bit about, you know, where your family comes from.
Okay, this is a map of part of Russia, Poland.
Mhm.
A lot of people sometimes use Belarus.
Yeah.
They know that area. And I have certificates from the Statue of Liberty,
Cool.
which I purchased to help fund the rebuilding of the Statue of Liberty. It needed repair.
Right.
So their name is on the wall. And my mom and dad came separately. They were kids. My father was maybe 5 years old, and he came on Lusitania, and that was the boat that was sunk by the Germans. But before, he came in around 1909, 1910. The war didn't start till 1917. And my mother came on, they both came interesting from Liverpool, through Liverpool, but they had to travel to get there.
Travel to get there, yeah.
But my mother came to this country. She was 12 years old when she left. I think she was 13 by the time she arrived. A very sad story. She never met her father until she came to America. Because he came to America, my grandmother was pregnant, World War I broke out. There were quotas, she couldn't come. And they had to wait till after the war. When she came to America, her first experience with America, she had the beautiful long hair, was to shave her hair all off because of head lice somebody had on the boat. And that's what they did. And years later, when I was doing pest control, and I told my mom that I was working with that and I found head lice somewhere. It was in America, head lice? How could that be? They take it away from you. So I said, no, Mom, wasn't so.
That's interesting. The what did they do? Do you know, like what their family did in that region? Because I know they were.
Okay, my mother came from a little town, Shethel, it's called, called Britain. And her mother and father, before he left, had a warehouse that stored supplies for the military. When the war broke out, there was trash. One day the Polish soldiers went through, another day the Russian soldiers went through, and they threatened them, scared my grandmother that they Although my daughter, my
Yeah.
mother, they didn't behave. So that was their background. Now, my grandpa Max, I think, was a businessman, and he came to this country, and
So we have
he
a
bought
next
real
slide.
estate. Yeah, on my
Read the
father's
next
side.
slide. Next slide. I think there might be a delay. All right, here we go.
Okay, that's a picture of my mother and father on the left, and I lost my dad when I was very, very young. I was 6 years old. It was a car
I'm
accident,
sorry.
and unfortunately, my mother was in that car at the same time, and she was being taken to a sanitarium for tuberculosis, and so basically, I was an orphan. But I never felt that, because the picture on the right is my aunt and uncle. And they have two children. That's the little Austin. That's where it comes from. He became almost like my brother, and she, my sister. We're still very, very close. And interesting enough, he grew up with same chickens and became an expert in poultry
Oh,
at
cool.
the University of Kentucky.
Wow,
This
that's
was
really nice.
That's my Uncle Saul and my Aunt Rose, but we use the word tanta, which means aunt. So that's, they took me in, and then when my mom got out of sanitarium, we all lived together.
Very great. And when you were in high school, so that'll be the next slide set, you're still in the town of Liberty, right? So that's the same location.
Yes, yeah, no, we didn't move much. Now, you gotta understand, Liberty was the big town. Where I'm really from.
Oh, you were from the
Ferndale.
rural Ferndale.
From outside of town of Ferndale. And I like to tell people, to say, well, how small was your town? Okay? And it's true. My uncle was a sheriff. My aunt that you saw was a tax collector. And I married the long distance operator.
Oh.
So there you go. Okay, that's a picture of me. On the left is in high school, my senior year, and on the right is I was in a Purim play. It's from the synagogue. Oh, you got the arrow. I am. Okay. I was always a little guy, and I was one of the three wise men in that play, because those were the only three people that couldn't sing. It was and I can't sing. So they gave me that part. And I was one of the three wise men.
That's so great. That's excellent. And then Miss Barbara comes into the picture, right? From Ferndale as well?
Actually, she was from another town over the hill called Woodbridge, but she moved to Liberty.
Okay.
And I met her in high school.
In high school.
And that was a senior.
That's a wonderful picture.
High school. Now, somewhere in between there, I left Liberty for 2 years and was in Florida. And my mother had remarried. And then I would go back and forth by myself, actually by train. And then I wanted to come back to New York, because I knew that I wanted to be something with insects. I was only 14. At 15, I left. My mother gave me permission, and I went back and lived with my aunt and uncle. So now I'm back in high school there. And that was one of the dances that I took Barbara to. And then the other picture is our wedding picture.
Nice.
Oh, more than 60 years ago.
Yeah, we have it here. I think is 1962? Yeah. Many, many years. Yes.
Yeah.
She's lovely, actually. I've had the opportunity, obviously, to meet her a few times over the years. She's always been so gracious and welcoming. Wonderful. And so, all right, so you're going to go to college now, and you already knew that you wanted to go into entomology by this time?
I didn't know what they called it. I knew I wanted to work with insects.
Yeah.
And when we get to mentors and that, I'll explain a little bit how I found out there's such a thing called an entomologist.
Right.
But yes, and it was kind of interesting, because even to this day, you meet people. I never met an entomologist That's Purdue, that's
Yes,
Cornell.
I think we need to go back
Right.
one. Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a delay here in the slides, so we apologize for that. Sometimes the internet
So-
does these things, but we want to go back to.
So I didn't know I was gonna, yeah, that's correct. I didn't know I was gonna be an entomologist, but then when I just decided I'm going to Cornell, I from across the street came running over to my side of the road. I was with my mom. You're a very foolish boy. You're going to school to be a bug doctor? There's a lot of sick people. And I was thinking, Robert Frost is my favorite poet,
Mhm.
came across a path in the road. I chose the one
Yeah.
less taken because you were gonna be an accountant, a doctor,
Right.
or a lawyer,
Those are your
not an
options.
entomologist.
Who knew, right?
Yeah.
I think, honestly, even though there's a lot more people that go into entomology today, we often find that when I'm dealing with students, a lot of students have no idea how fabulous a career in entomology can be, right? So,
Yeah, but what do you do?
yeah,
I asked, what do you do?
and there's so many things you do, universities to consulting to government to federal jobs to so many fun things, which is great. So at Cornell, right? So I think we're going to go to the picture with Cornell. It looks like there that started your master's thesis, and I wanted to have you talk a little bit about your experience at Cornell.
Okay, well, my thesis was with face flies, which was a new species invading the United States from Canada.
Mhm.
And so I was doing tests for 2 years. They thought I was gonna stay there for the PhD. That's why they kept me there. So, but I decided just to get the master's and I was working with different chemicals, attractants and repellents and livestock and run them through an overhead tunnel. And the flies would leave the cow's face and go up on the board. There would be blood, stuff like that. And I would evaluate that. And I worked a little part-time in college as a waiter. I worked for Dr. Pimentel, who was a very famous ecologist, which was a brand new area at that time. It helped him. And I was one of the few people that could drive a stick shift tractors and stuff like that. So I got to drive these big water tanks to go out and water his plants and so forth. But it gave me an understanding of ecology. So I'm kind of like a two-headed monster. One is kill them and the other is protect them.
Mhm.
And they don't talk to each other normally, these heads. And so it was quite interesting. While I was taking ecology classes, the people were not happy with me because I was taking the other end
Wow.
as well. So
And I believe, so when was your first experience really getting into that operational side of pest control?
well, what happened was when you went to Cornell, I was in School of Agriculture, you had to get farm credits.
Okay.
Well, I grew up chicken,
Yeah, sure.
okay? So you take a test and I drove a tractor and I did this and that, and they said, you got enough points for chickens. You have to go work on a vegetable farm or a dairy farm. I was too small to lift the tanks for the dairy, so I took the vegetable, 100 hours a week, 35 cents an hour. And I did that for one summer. And then they said you could do whatever you want in the summer in your field. Well, there was a pest control operator 12 miles from where I lived.
Wow.
And I was interested in livestock entomology, okay? And want to be a Nobel Prize winner in research. So I walked in there and he was interested in college students and he took me in. Guys,
Yes, I think you can see the clover.
yeah,
If you look on the screen, sort of at the,
I never forget where I came from. He took me to Rutgers to a pest control meeting and I saw these people taking notes and wanting to learn. And I said, wow, but I still wanted the livestock entomology, okay? So But I kept in touch with him and I used to do, oh, by the jobs. They'd hang me from a roof of a building with a rope and a hose for cluster flies. He was a nut to buy military equipment. So this is 1959. Okay, 1960s. He buys this machine that can take a 55-gallon drum of oil and convert it completely to smoke. It was to hide a Navy ship so the Japanese couldn't find it, like in a minute. Okay, he's going to make a mosquito fogger out of it. His first job, Monticello, the next town over where he was, graduation mosquito job. I'm supposed to drive the truck. Go out there, and he tells me, if you hear it sputter and the flame starts, get out of the truck and run 100 yards because it could blow up. So it stopped. I ran 200 yards. And I went back, I started it again and went up. And I'm telling you, there was a thermal inversion and the smoke just went straight up and then mushroomed out like an atomic bomb, It was in the newspaper because it was looking like an atomic bomb. We didn't kill any mosquitoes that day, nothing. Okay. He gave me experimental stuff. Bayer 29493 became Baytex. Something wrong with it. Mixed it with pink. I got sick. He told me, okay, take the day off. Don't come in. It's 2:00 in the morning. Don't come in till noon.
The next day.
The next day.
You have much recovery time.
I'm doing a DDT. We dusted with DDT powder. I'm the little guy. So for bats, I hold the end right next to the bats. And this big guy, Emmett, he's cranking the other end, right? Well, let me tell you, the mask came off. I was choking. He picked me up, took me out, wiped me off, put it back on, back in again. And about 2 months later, I almost killed them on a bed bug job. Accidentally, obviously.
Right.
We were told to dump everything out of the drawers for bed bugs that they didn't get ready and just dump it on a blanket on the floor. And I did. And the guy had a loaded pistol and it went off and the bullet went through the wall. And he was working in the next room. We were alternating rooms. I said, I killed him. I raced in. He's looking like, what did you do? And I said, after that, we were careful when we dumped the stuff out. But I mean, I was hung on a meat hook because I walked into a butcher shop and spraying and I didn't know you were supposed to. And the guy picked me up. I held on to my sprayer and they hung me by a hook and I fell down off of it. That's I got they gave me a new uniform. Yeah. There's a lot of crazy stories like that.
Oh, that's kind of dangerous, right? So with all of that, but in the beginning, you were right at the beginning of
Yes.
really just determining what to use, what products were being developed, and what's the best practices. And I think over your many years.
And at Cornell, we tested Vapona in long spaghetti strips. And I was the one that came up with the idea to make it into a strip.
Well, we use Vapona here and there, honestly, in our laboratory every once in a while. So that's really great. So then from Cornell, you went to Purdue, which I graduated from Purdue as well. So we're Boilermakers.
This is a B&G sprayer.
Let me show everybody. I think everyone
Modified
here.
Bill Brem was the first class. B&B, and I have a Purdue Lights, and I actually have here, and it sits here all the time.
Awesome.
That's Purdue.
Purdue.
So okay, now, if my wife was going to leave me, that was the time she was going to leave. Okay, because first of all, I left to go there to get the degree so I could come back and work in the East. And she wanted to stay in East. Okay, now picture this. We got a little kid, really small. I got her in the car with my insect collection around her. And they lose all our furniture and everything for 17 days. We have nothing. I got a rented cot from the college. And on the 17th day, it comes all this stuff in. And Dr. Osmond, who's head of the entomology department, tells me I have to go to New Carlisle, Indiana, for
Mhm.
2 days. I leave her with the baby, with all that stuff. Now, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm a graduate student and they're working. So what, they take 3 of us and they get out there and they put us in the middle of a field. They put us 50 yards apart from each other. And they tie a glass on this arm and a glass on that arm. And we stand there like this. Okay? And the professor says, okay. And he runs into a truck and closes the windows. Okay, and we're standing there like this, and we're in a field of oats. And here comes an airplane. I gotta do that.
So you're the stand, essentially.
Yeah, and it's coming down low, and I'm the middle guy, and the plane's right over the thing, and I go like this, and nothing happens. Nothing happens. He comes running out of the truck. He says, okay, he takes these off. He says, go shower.
Unbelievable.
He said, Dr. Brand, nothing happened here. Wait a minute. He says, no, that's a new machine. That's called ULV.
That's so interesting.
And that was the first testing.
Wow.
And Andy Granatelli developed it for race cars.
Look at that.
An ounce covered an acre.
Yeah. Still does. That's
Right.
what we use
So
now.
I
We
was
don't
a
use it.
guinea pig, one of the first guinea pigs.
I did not know that story. That's
And-
incredible.
And yeah, and then they give me another job. They tell me to go out and collect water from the Kankakee River, from the river. And mud to send to Shell because they're doing studies on aldrin and dieldrin and residues.
Sure.
And so they tell me to get to Kankakee, you go out on this railroad
Mhm.
thing and you load a bucket, the trains don't go there anymore. So I go out there, it's a big stress. I'm putting this thing down, and here comes a train. Heck, here comes a train. I said, it's gonna go off to the side. So it comes on that trestle. So I can't get off. I climb down on the trestle and I'm hanging on like this. And in Indiana, when a train goes, it's 100, 130 cars. Right, it seems like forever. And I'm shaking because it's shaking and I'm scared. And then when I come back and I tell Glenn Laker this, he says to me, well, I'll be darned. That's what he says to me.
Dr. Frishman, it sounds like you may have a little cat inside of you with some of these lives, it sounds like, with all this
Yeah.
exposure, but that ULV story is just phenomenal. And so when you were at Purdue, what is it that what was your dissertation? What did you study?
I work with chemosterilants to try to sterilize roaches.
Mhm.
And I test German roaches and I had a lab and I had to dissect them under a microscope with teeny little scissors and I did this for a long time.
Mhm.
I was at Purdue for 3.5 years. I only had a year and a half to go to finish my master's, PhD at Purdue, but I
Yeah.
mean at Cornell, but I left to do that. And then I was gonna get out in 2 years, and then my professor left. My major professor left.
So you had to find somebody else to finish out?
Yes,
Wow.
but what they said was, you're the professor.
Oh.
They
Wow.
made me an instructor
Cool.
and put John Osmond on my
Yeah.
committee and one other person they added.
That's so
And I
fantastic.
had all his responsibilities
It's amazing.
for a year and a half.
That's amazing. And actually, I think most people know what a tremendous history, the pest control conference has at Purdue. I mean,
And I got to run it.
That's
That's right.
that's
And I'm telling the rest of the staff at Purdue, entomology department, do this, do that. They were very good about it.
Yeah.
Like, really. They
It's a
really.
big job, just
Yeah.
running that conference. I mean,
Yes,
I know in the years that I've been there, it is packed. I mean, the pest control community is so incredibly loyal, I think, to that conference, and they have such an amazing turnout, always.
maybe because it was my background.
Uh-huh.
My first nickel that I made
Mhm.
was tying a drunk shoelaces between two bars. The whole story, and I could go in. I ran a tourist house when I was a really little kid. So that conference only would have about 100 people tops.
Yeah.
And I figured out a way that first year, 400 people.
It's incredible. That is
400.
incredible. Yeah, that's
There,
wonderful.
went up after that, and we had exhibits. I had exhibits and all kinds of stuff.
It's really great.
The Purdue was going nuts. I wanted to set up a tent and put stuff. They said, you can't have a circus here. You can't. They're very calm about, the thing.
Yeah.
So, but John Osmond was on my side. So,
That's fantastic. And so I know it's hard to leave Purdue, right? I know each time I go back, and I just went back this Christmas, and it's so great always to be on campus, but you went somewhere else after that, right?
Yeah, well, what happened?
Yeah.
I went somewhere else, but for 44 years, I went to Purdue every year in the conference for a week. I
Yeah.
dedicated to that.
And
44 out of 45 years.
Have they always had it in January, in the middle of the winter?
Yes, yes, that was when classes were
Yeah,
not, and they could use the things.
sure.
God looked down
It's
at
rough.
Purdue and said, snow at that time, right? So what happened is I had a very good job offer at Purdue,
Mhm.
but I promised my wife and I was going to Urban and all.
Yeah.
I went back east. I went to a conference. I couldn't get a job. I was on the way out the door going back to Purdue. And with my suitcase,
Right.
and somebody yelled across the room, "Hey, Austin." And it was a student from Farmingdale, State University of New York.
Mhm.
He wasn't getting out yet. He was still at Cornell. They had a job offering to start a pest control program. Wow. I
Yeah,
went the next day, I looked at it, it was like a gift from heaven.
absolutely.
And I could do this and teach. So I didn't want to be a teacher, but then I had to teach a class. And that first class, like, oh,
It's fun.
right. And
And I think, were you doing
yeah, I
research there as
brought my
well?
roaches.
Yes.
I brought my roaches and kept that going like that.
Dr. Frishman, I'm gonna have to talk to Miss Barbara. Did you ever have, I'm sure you had lots of escapees in the home, yeah? Were you bringing them home?
I All right,
All right, it sounds like we're getting into a story that may not have come out before.
I had hissing roaches
Mhm.
and I had them hidden in the basement. And one day I was playing ping pong with my daughter and the ball went back where they were and they started to hiss. And she went running upstairs, Mommy, he's got the roaches here. So I got caught with those roaches, but I never kept, well, I did when I did some testing
Uh-huh,
with glue boards and stuff.
sure.
Yeah, I did have some American roaches.
Yes, look, it's a true testament to our families, right? Yeah, I'm gonna tell you, rats in the freezer. I know our staff puts all kinds of bugs, all kinds of things in their freezer, so they're all so patient.
Tarantula, I had a pet tarantula and my son had one and the cat skins he stuck on top of the cage.
Uh-huh.
And my wife opened up the windows in the spring and it blew the tarantula. She thought it was alive and I was doing a seminar in the next town over. And I get this emergency call. You guys have me. He said, everybody was like, Barbara says, you gotta come home now.
Yeah, that's hilarious. And so at SUNY, I think you started with students as well. So we've got some photographs of some of your classes. And I wanted to talk a little bit about, you have been such a mentor to so many students. And so what has been your philosophy really in dealing, how you approach students?
probably the most important thing in my life, next to my marriage, my
Mhm.
family. I'll start this way. A mediocre teacher tells, a good teacher explains, a superior teacher demonstrates, and a great teacher inspires.
That's right.
And you've got to build a flame and keep it burning
Mhm.
so that they run to come to class. It's not easy. It's not easy. I like this. I used to keep this on my refrigerator. All right,
Mhm.
because Farmingdale, where we taught, was let each person become all that they are capable of being.
Mhm.
But most of those students were, I'll call them PhDs, poor, hungry, and desperate. And A-Rod, the baseball player, came up with that in and they didn't think that they were going to be great students.
Mhm.
That many of them didn't know what they wanted to do.
Mhm.
And so I started them, I made them as a team, all for one and one for all. We have small groups.
Mhm.
Sometimes the smallest class was about 6 in the beginning and then 12. We get up to 24 scopes.
Mhm.
Okay, so there you see pictures of different classes and they designed the shirts. We all bought shirts. One group, they called themselves after me, the Frishmanity. Yeah. Another time it was the LD10, there were 10 students. One time I had about 6 girls in the class and they called themselves Austin's Angels. The whole class. I had nothing to do with it. All right. But the point was that they would help each other. And if somebody's grade started to slip,
Yeah.
I would tell the rest of the class, bring them in, make them study. Now,
Right.
when I say poor, hungry, one of the students, 2 weeks before exams, came in and was going to quit. And I'd rather not say his name. I said, why? He said, I haven't eaten in 2 days and I don't have any money. I said, you're not quitting. Gave him whatever it was, $40, $50. I said, and you will finish.
That's great.
He has 2 children that have gone to college now.
Mhm.
He became very successful in a building management program in charge of pest control for a large real estate. One time we were playing baseball and one of the students broke an arm and he couldn't make it for the final exam to
Mhm.
give his oral. He got an incomplete. The entire class came back. He gave his talk 2 weeks later after graduation.
Mhm.
Got his thing.
Oh, great.
Okay. But that's what you do. To this day, I still get, I'm very proud of this. I'd say 2 calls a week from a former student
Yeah.
all the time. And I haven't taught in over 40 years.
It's incredible.
So
It's a tremendous impact, that you've made on so
It's-
many people. I'm going to tell you, and I mean, I think, I met you in 2000, right? I had just I didn't know honestly who you were because I studied plant pathology, nematology, right? So a whole different field. So when I came to, I started a job in Louisiana, new to the pest control community, and there was a pest control meeting, the Greater New Orleans Pest Control Association. So that really was one of my, it was like a membership meeting. So you were the speaker, right, for that meeting, and I actually sat down right next to you. And really, that was the first time that I met you. And now all these years, right? I mean, I look at you as a mentor. with providing so much guidance and help and, all these things over the years. So the impact is tremendous, I think.
I don't distinguish who was a student, who wasn't. They're like my family. But Allie Tacey, which is Allie Allen.
Right, fantastic.
She didn't know what she wanted to do. And the head of the entomology department at Cornell came, visited me. And I said, I'll bring her with me. And we took her to Purdue. We introduced her coffee.
Yeah.
We find people that are good for the industry. Stan Cope.
Yeah.
He was laid off, went out, and boy,
back here.
Atlantic Coast, AGP, and a number of people like that.
That's great.
I feel very good about. But sometimes I feel even better, if it's possible, when they don't ever become in pest control. I've had one as a librarian in biology, one as a restaurant in Paris, one as a manager of a elderly center, but they all still write to me, and
it's really wonderful.
So, and I guess the most important one was Earl Fraser, because they said, what is your impact? He was a Black student in the Wolf program, wider opportunities at Farmingdale. We started a program to bring in students from oppressed areas. 3 years it takes you instead of a 2-year school. He was in the dorms. He wouldn't go home. He wouldn't talk to anybody. Long story short, I told him, Earl, got to talk to somebody. He said, I don't care. I'm not talking to you. I said, okay. I wrote my name down. I wrote my phone number. I said, when you're ready, call me. He was an operator at night somewhere, and 11 o'clock at night, he got off where he calls me. Till 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, I sat and talked with him, turned him around. It was a tragic story about his wife. Went on to go to the University of Buffalo. Came back 10 years later, walked into my lab with his fiance.
It's hard.
I'm Dr.
So awesome.
Medical doctor.
Yeah.
And he works in Harlem.
Oh, that's so great. What a great story. And I know we have other students, so your impact is tremendous, right? And I think it's really a great learning lesson for so many people, in the future. We give back. I think it's great. And actually on the next slide, got a couple of I know we've got the huddles, right? So hopefully there's a little bit of a delay in the picture, but talk about a couple of your students.
Well,
here.
Pat Hodel was one of the first lady students, I'll say, to make a real impact in the industry. She started Women in Pest Control. Gutsy kid. Tells me she wants to work in Bermuda. I tell her, listen, it's a good place to tourist, but it's a little island. It's isolated. No, she says, I know you know people there. Okay. Make her the contact. She gets the job, and I'm worried about her. So I tell the guy who hires her, Dennis D'Souza, good, and he used to hire me and bring me out about a week after she's there. I'll make sure she's okay. I spent the time with her that week, and gave her my hard hat and my flashlight when I left. And you know what goes around comes around. The picture there is with her son, Ben. And Ben won the Frishman scholarship.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
he's great too, right?
Yeah.
So he's really excellent.
I know him for many, many years. He's a great kid.
And then at SUNY, right, you did a lot of field work. We have got some photographs of you. I think this is back in the 70s.
Right.
There, we're gonna get to that.
Yeah, well, what happened was I had them for 2 different classes as seniors the same semester. I would put the 2 classes together on the same day. So we could leave 7 o'clock in the morning and come back at 7 o'clock at night. Go on field trips and go to see research labs. We would go to rat dumps gun barrels. I once had them in a landfill on a flatbed truck with live rats running all around. First, I took them in the day, there was nothing there, and then at night, they saw them run. And here they're at a pest control operators facility with the drills and learning how to drill.
Wow.
And one of the field trips for the day was you ride with a technician for a whole day. You start 8 o'clock in the morning and you go to 4 or 5, whatever it is. And here's a list of things that you need to look for. Questions asked and learned.
Cool.
Well, the two things, they ended up getting internships in the companies.
Yes.
And when they got out of school, they knew something besides just the book.
Just love.
And I feel very fortunate in that I am a teacher, but I also am a hands-on person, and I did the hands-on before I finished and really got into teaching.
And I think that's important. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about your lecture techniques, right? What you used. But again, I think very hands-on in getting that information to the students.
Well, I try to bring the audience in. There's what they call a safety zone between where you are and the class. And you step into that, boy, they wake up just like that. Okay, and I use props, different things. I put on little puppets and live insects. I put the antennae on them. I run around, and I don't know what made me start to do that to begin with, but it just came naturally. And because so many teachers are so stoic and so boring, and I just find you fall asleep.
You fall asleep, right? I almost feel that you have to get that information out, but there's a little bit of entertainment in there as well to keep everybody's attention.
Right now, what I did with the students, and it's the hardest thing to do, you start out to write between lines, teeny little lines, first a big line, then a little line, and you got to stay on the paper. Yeah, and your thinking is always like that. So the first lab, what I do is I put the students down there and I put them a piece of paper and a crayon. There's a big piece of paper under it. Like, now go off the paper. Go over here. Now, if you can't physically stand on the table, on the lab table, well, first draw on the other person's. Now stand and do this. I said, now you're ready to learn. I'll say, then I give them the first quiz and I have a bulletin board set up and I have articles on there. And one of them is a totally nonsense article. It's about the poisonous spit spider from Mad Magazine. And I ask them on the quiz, how do you identify the poisonous spit spider? They all write down, you turn it over, and that's how you know, but it spits on you and you die. They write that down. And they come in to argue, like mark it wrong. And then they show me the article and they say, it's right here in writing. And I go, aha. What's in writing is always right. What I say could be wrong. Maybe I think it's right, but somebody should question your professors. And if those students went on to other colleges, their professors would call me and say, oh boy, we got a freshman student. And that's Dennis D'Souza on the left in Bermuda, where I give a talk. And I'm very fortunate I've been able to lecture a lot of places around the country and around the world, different places.
Great. And I know I'm going to go to the next slide. So I think one of your most famous students, right, is
Dr. Bobby Corrigan.
That's right.
Who I'm still very friendly with, and I had the honor of him coming here, staying one evening with us with his wife. But it was close, very close, and we have a lot of things in common that a lot of people don't know. We both write poetry. We both own property that we keep an environmental, he's got a farm out in Indiana. I belong with my son, 50 acres in upstate New York. He's a wonderful person. And one of the things I try to do is get scholarships for students. Scholarship that he got. And those things motivate that student. I'm good. I can go on. I can become a useful person.
It's really great. For those that are interested, actually did an interview with him last year, so people can go to our YouTube channel and learn more about his life, which is very interesting. But I think in a lot of ways, also that really interacting with that audience and with those students and mentorship and a lot of those things. I think you and him have a lot of similarity in that, and just really advocating for the industry as well.
Yeah, just to show you.
Important.
2 weeks ago, a friend of ours here came over to me with her grandson, and he's working with rats in New York City on their brain and so forth and all that. And I said, you have to meet Dr. Bobby Cork. And I called Bobby, I gave him, and he made the phone call, and they're going to meet.
Well, that's awesome. And so while you were at SUNY as well, we're going to talk about the combat roach control system. So that's some work that you did as well.
Right, when most of the people known as Max Force, the original ones were black and we put out, there's the camera right there. That was,
yeah, they can see.
And this was the first tube ever made of that material. Now, how did this whole thing come about? One of the field trips was to American Cyanamid in Princeton. And the person who I could make that contact because Dr. Bob Little was in charge. And then they came up with a product that was for an anti-malarial drug. It didn't work. They tried it for fire ants. It did work. Then they wanted to try on roaches. They didn't have any roaches. They didn't know anybody with roaches except me. So they said, you want to try this? Now, in all my wisdom, I said, I don't know if it's going to work because we can't find a really good bait for German roaches. He said, you want to do the research or don't you? I said, okay, we'll try. So we tried it, and my golly, it was like unbelievable. Well, a lot of failures in the beginning, mold grows on the product and so forth. Took us 2 years to do it. I used a couple students helped me with the product, and then in the field, as well.
It really revolutionized, right? The way that
it, in a way, in such a healthy way. Perhaps one of the most important lectures I ever gave was at Mount Sinai Hospital to about 150 medical doctors going for recertification. And I'm the only non-medical doctor. I'm a medical entomologist, but non-medical doctor. And they introduced me. First, they talked about asthma and how to correct it. And then he introduced me as the knowledgeable person in the environment. Asthma is an environmental problem. And cockroaches is the #1 reason for asthma. And we talked to the doctors about no spraying, no flushing roaches. And that was the start.
super interesting.
And then I, ended up working housing projects and so forth. That was
really, really neat. And so then you were at the university, right? So then what made you decide to go into private consulting?
okay. Sometimes you have to be pushed.
Because that's a scary thing.
Yeah.
Right? To go from a regular job to who knows what you're going to be doing.
I was a full professor. I had just been nominated for distinguished professor. The day I turned in my resignation, I didn't know I was being recognized. I turned in my resignation because they wanted me to teach not pest control classes because there weren't enough students. and I refused to do it. So the president of the school said, I'll give you a sabbatic, you can't quit. And see about making this into a 4-year program, which I did, but nobody ever did anything about it. But I then went out on my own.
It's amazing. And I know you've done a lot of all kinds of interesting jobs over the many, many, many years, right?
Yeah, this right here, this is what, first of all, you know, what is a consultant? Again, we talk about it's an expert who's a little spurt from out of town. Has been. There were no consultants in what that comes called structural testing. There were in the food industry, and pest control, but not mine. I'm the third PhD in urban pest management.
Wow.
Out of Purdue, and that was the only program. And so I had to create it. Okay, I had to create in the minds of the pest control people that they needed.
They need you, right?
Right.
And your advice.
And I started the class at night. The bosses came, they saw, they said, wow. Then they would call me in for.
So that's how you started. So you actually started doing some continuing education, or was it just free and
No, by the
learn?
time I left, I was 12 years teaching.
Yeah, so they
I
knew
was,
you.
I was well known.
Yeah.
In the field.
Sure.
Small fish,
Right.
big fish in a little pond. Okay?
Yeah.
And the very first job that I got, it was before I was right there as a teacher the first year, was with an electric company, a gas electric company.
Mhm.
And I'll show you how much you don't know. Okay, I go down there and let's see if I might have this sheet. It's the no one called the Long Island Electric Company.
Uh-huh.
And I kept a record on the back of my consulting jobs, and the first thing of what I charged was $75 and $3 expenses. And when I went back to Purdue, uh, to $150 expenses, $150, I gave it all back. Yeah. But anyway, to this company, they're showing me this picture of an insect. It's a mud dauber. So we got a problem with it. I said, well, usually these are beneficial insects. He says, it blew a house up. I said, that's really, really unusual.
Mhm.
They blew 3 houses up. I said, at this time, I better shut up. Just tell me what the problem is.
Right.
There's an escape for the gas on the house, and it had a cover on it. And they were building their mud tubes under it and blocking it off, and the house blew up.
Yeah.
So there are 4 things that I use in a consulting job. What is it? Why is it here?
Yeah.
How do I get rid of it as quickly as possible?
Sure.
How do I keep it from coming back?
Uh-huh.
All right. Usually the pest control industry doesn't answer that last one. So it's the mud dauber. Why is it there? There's a shadow. There's a protective cover.
Mhm.
Cut that off. Put screening, just a little flat screening, but enough. Ask your engineer so the gas can go out.
You have to know a lot about construction
So,
and everything
Now you
else.
talk about guts.
Yeah, for sure. Especially with
So
the,
how many houses? Yeah, so that's 100 and something houses. Cut them all off. They did. There hasn't been a single house that blew up since.
yeah, thank goodness. That's amazing, really.
My second job was with a company that's not in business anymore. It's a food company. Well, I'm going there. They think they got capra beetle, but they don't. But they're closing them up. They shut them down. And I go in there. I said, "Wow, I wonder if I can." They can't find the insect. And I go, "I hope I know what I'm doing." And I find a hat on the floor. And I open it up in a crack, and there's all the beetles lined up because Trogoderma lives in cracks. Capra beetle means cracks and brick. and they had brooms instead of vacuum cleaners. And I said, oh my goodness, do this, that, and that, and that's what happened. I became sometimes the court of last resort in pest control, and sometimes it is an emergency of emergencies.
Oh, I
I
would
mean,
imagine. You have to resolve the
where-
issue now, I'm sure.
we're talking, I'm coming back from Hartford Housing Authority, dead tired, because I leave 5 o'clock in the morning. It's now about 6 o'clock at night, and I get a call from Rick Cooper, but
Mhm.
not Rick, but his dad.
Mhm.
They have a building that makes material for organ transplants. You gotta make it fresh. And when isn't, they need it then. They just shut it down.
Yes. Yeah, that's a huge
Oh.
impact.
To grab Dr. Pepper, and I go. And
Get
I
some-
go in there and I go around and I take a look and I see what's going, and there's a water fountain and the water's going over. And the flies that are in there are the dark-winged fungus fly, and they got onto the beakers that were wet that was sitting outside the door.
Mhm.
They thought they were by the window. I said, no. So they do this, that, boom, boom. I do this in about a half hour. Yeah, I think it was Rick. He says, you can't just leave in a half hour. We're gonna charge you for that. I says, listen, you go to a dentist. You can pull your tooth in 4 seconds or 2 hours. What do you want?
Issue resolved.
Right.
Move on, right.
Okay? I said, I'm tired. Okay? And Barbara would say to me many times, because she would write reports on, how do you know what you do is right? I said, you handle the office, you handle the phone. Anybody ever complain?
Yeah.
I said, no, I see.
Yeah. No callbacks.
Right.
That's a good thing.
So you get involved in things as a consultant
Yeah.
that nobody else would know. I mean, I had many of these, but these two, I say,
Mhm.
this is the United Nations
Cool.
and this is the Mars candy plant. I
Wow.
was the outside chief sanitarian for all the Mars candy plants in the United States, except Chicago, which George Okamura had. He's my friend. And you went where no one else could go. I was in the Secretary General's office when the Falkland Islands were being attacked. And he was running the session and I was on my hands and knees in his office. You go everywhere.
It's really, look, that's the one thing about pest control. Honestly, I mean, you see so many interesting, cool things behind the scenes, right?
I saw the best and the worst of America.
That's right. You do.
I mean, the thing is, I have places like United Nations, Mars Cancer, but I also had New York City Housing Authority, Hartford Housing. And there would be murders in there, and my wife would say, what are you doing? You're gonna get killed. You don't need this. And I said, you're right, but the children
They
do,
need it, right?
with the roaches, no eyebrows.
Oh,
Germs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the impact is huge. I think, a lot of times when I'm giving pest control presentations, I remind people, because it's when you get caught up in the day to day and you're running around, like, how important of a job it is, that all of us do.
You better care.
Yes, and you
Yeah.
really get out of it. You're right. You're right.
Right.
Absolutely. So I think, we talked a little bit about how many people, not how, but some of the people that you've mentored, right? You've touched so many people, but I know you have had mentors. So we're gonna
Yes.
move to this, and I think
Yeah, we start right there with my aunt and uncle. Hard work ethics, being honest. I remember my uncle telling me, you're too light for heavy work. and you're too heavy for light work. You better stay in school.
So great.
So
That is great.
Yeah. that's my Uncle Saul and my Tante Rose.
Yeah, that's really great. And then I think we move into also some of the professional, mentors that you've had in school and
Right.
across the industry. We're just having a little bit of a delay. Sorry, everybody, but here we are.
Okay, so the fellow on the left is my biology teacher, long after he's retired, and I stayed very close with him. He wanted to be me. He went to Cornell. He wanted to be an entomologist, but he had to drop out of school because of money. And he took me, he had me work with the insect collection. He saw that I was interested in insects, I came back and so he nominated me eventually for the Wall of Fame in high school thing. But he, right to the end, until he passed away, I would visit him and so forth. A wonderful man, Tom Nickel. The one on the right is the Clover. That's Al Hockman, and with myself, and that's already when he was retired and down here. So, yeah.
And back at the Purdue days, John Osmond, of course. I'm gonna get to that picture here in a minute.
Okay, that is a picture of my major professor who left, Bill Butts, and John Osmond. And Bill Butts, I feel guilty in a way. He had to leave because he didn't have a PhD. And I was getting a PhD, and they kept telling him he's got to get it, and he didn't. He was going to go to Notre Dame, and I said I'd follow him if he went to Notre Dame. I almost ended up nice Jewish boy at Notre Dame, but he ended up in Oneonta, and then I would visit him there. And both of those gentlemen taught me a lot outside of class. John Osmond would have all his students at his house. I had all the students. I asked after graduation, in the middle, they'd come. They knew Barbara. Okay. Barbara, to this day, sometimes it's just a former student needs a job. I think this one will be good for him. I think. Bill Butts. I had 2 children. They're finishing grad school, very little money, obviously. And Ball Tires. He gave me money for Ball Tires and said, pass it on. And I did. I eventually bought tires. Another student. So.
I think you've done more than just buy tires, Dr. Frishman.
But Bill Butts is just a great, what a teacher.
It's really fabulous.
That's Arnold Malice. And Arnold Malice wrote that big handbook of pest control. I have one over there and another one on the side. And years later, I revised his book. But he was at the first Whitmire Symposium with me, and I was helping run it. And he was there, and he had a little pad, and he's taking notes. And I walked over to him, and I said, Arnold, the great Dr. Malice is taking notes, and everybody's taller than me. And he took his pencil, and he put it down on me like, just, young man, the day you stop taking notes, you're brain dead.
You know what? I am going to record. Well, we're recording this, and I'm going to take that little section and I'm going to play it. It drives me crazy when, folks come in and they don't even have a pen or a piece of paper to take any kind of notes. How do you remember, right? It's
now, I don't care how good a consultant you are and how much you know, you need help.
Right.
The Stoy Hedges, I send an insect once in a while. I got stuck in an operating room in New York City where they get $10,000 an hour then for the room. And they got sarcophagid flies in the room, and it's filters all the way around, filters. I rush there, I'm running around. I find pigeon dung over here. Oh, no, it's not that. I go here, I go there. I go to the custodian closet and I see the opened up and there's 4 sarcophages on the wall there. What are they doing there? I don't understand. I call one of them else. He says to me, where are you? I tell him.
Yeah.
He says, look for the cherry trees. Oh, so what are you talking about? He says, Central Park is right across the street. There's 10 caterpillars. They're parasitic on the 10 caterpillars now. Wow.
Wow.
Go to the Parks Department, put a screen in.
Yeah.
It's like light traps, do thing.
You know, I think this is all a partnership, right? I mean,
That's-
there's such an incredible network. I will say this, I am honored that you called me about a termite job you had somewhere in Florida. I think it was an above ground colony, so
Yes.
that was
Yes.
awesome.
Well, because I know, and I get that here, you use things like infrared cameras
That's right.
and all kinds of
Yeah, and I think, you know, the pest control community and really vector control as well. I mean, it's such a network of people that, I mean, though people have consulting jobs and businesses, competitors, but really not really. Everybody works together for the greater good, it seems. And so I think that's one of the things that I love so much about this industry.
One of my mottos is the student better go further than the professor and learn more, or the world goes backwards.
For sure.
And when you first tell them that, they look at you like, nah. But it's happened in their own fields, whatever they are. One of my former students is a forensic, he just retired, the forensic entomologist for the New York City Police Department. He was brilliant when he was a student of mine. And you know, it means so, but of course, Bobby Corey and what he does.
Sure. So, you know, one of the questions actually.
I think they skipped one.
Oh, I'm sorry. You had E.O. Wilson. Yeah. When
Yeah,
you tell us a
E.O.
little bit about E.O. Wilson?
Well, I never met him, I didn't know him, but I read his books and I was like in awe. And then they had a PCT conference, pest control technology. He spoke on ants because he was the person that opened my eyes that what I do on my property in upstate New York affects what happens in Mexico.
Right.
And at that point, the guy that cut all the grass had to leave the milkweed.
That's right. Yeah.
He had to leave the milkweed. And I taught the guy to cut the grass, and now he told all the other farmers about that.
That is
And so one person can make a difference.
absolutely. And, you know, Dr. Frishman, I mean, you have done so much and you stay so busy. And, you know, we're going to talk a little bit about, I'm sitting in your office and it frankly is just covered in plaques. Right? I mean, you can look at one wall, it's from top to bottom, and there's things on your desk. And I look over and there are more plaques. And so, I mean, you have reached obviously the pinnacle, right? Of, I think you've won every award in our industry. And you run around and do all this work. How in the world do you have time, for example, to sit and write articles and in books? And I mean, that is true dedication.
I make a goal. I have over 3,000 miles of my phone. You sit in airplanes and you wait.
Right.
I wrote preparing for pesticide certification book. I wrote that just in airplane.
In the air.
Sitting where
I will tell you a story though. I love airplanes because that is the one place
you can think.
that you can think. It's quiet. The phone doesn't ring, right? So now they have these features where you can still connect by text. And I'm like, I never connect. But it's really, it's awesome, honestly.
Yes.
So that's interesting. That's really what part of your focus. But you have won so many awards.
Oh, and there's another way too. I think the best way Bobby Corrigan once put it. We gave a seminar somewhere, both of us. My invoice went out, he didn't send his invoice. And it's a bit former student in his company and so forth. So he calls him up. He says, Bobby, he says, it's 8 months, you haven't sent the invoice. He says, Austin sent his. Bobby says, I don't have a Barbara. And she's my left hand and my right hand.
Yeah, you know, that's so awesome.
I never went to the bank.
Yeah, it's a tremendous.
And I went to, I got a check one time to surprise her for something. They wouldn't give me the check. They were gonna call her and I had to explain it was a surprise. Okay?
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, this is part of, and I think this is, part of this interview too, is just really to understand that support system. And I think all of us that run around and, everyone here, has a job and they do their thing. Our families are so important.
Yes.
Friends and family, really.
Yes.
That provide all that support that you have to jump on a plane and go somewhere, or I'm late today, can you get my kid off the school, or like, I just can't get to the house, sorry, whatever it is. So my house is going to be a mess today because I got to write this report.
I had an agreement with Barbara. We go somewhere, I'll be home within 72 hours, they want to say. But you do a warehouse and it's seized by the FDA, you sleep there.
Yeah, it's incredible. And so I think we're going to move on to the next slide, and we're going to talk about some of the terminology that is just in supporting people too. And you've really been a trailblazer. Obviously, we've learned a few things today.
Right, I see it got an archopestology.
That's right.
There's no such a word. I made it up. And it's the study of architecture for the control of pests. Now, probably I learned that when I was, let's see, World War II was over in 45, 46. So but in 1947, my uncle brought home this marvelous thing. He stuck in the window and the flies didn't come in anymore. It was called a screen. I couldn't get screens before. I'm telling you, we go on a chicken farm. So you build something to keep something out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this picture, that was a wooden rail.
Mm-hmm.
And there were koi, that's koi in that pond. And it's a very famous place down here that people visit, Japanese gardens. And people sit and stand there and they rest their arm on that and they look down at the koi. And paper wasps were getting on there and chewing on that material because it was wood and stinging them. And the pest control operator says, if I paint the pesticide on there, it's going to go in and the koi are going to die and all that. You say, well, what is it? Paper wasps. Why are they here? Chewing on that. Get rid of that.
Get rid of it. Right.
Put that on.
Just really understanding, I think, that whole construction, the environment, your example of the cherry, right? Cherries that are on those trees. I mean, you have to look more than just,
Right.
hey,
And then
I'm here for 5.
I'm not an engineer, but I'm gonna come up with something, say, you have to do this and that. I'd say Mars, probably over $1 million a year, not to fumigate, just by using air to suck out insects and skins out of the peanuts in Florida and down in Georgia.
Absolutely. And I think, that's super important, and it's sort of going into that environment. It's just really understanding nature, I think.
So that's where that ecology head
That's right.
comes together with the rescue.
And just look at the big picture. And I think, as I know, I've talked to a lot of pest control companies, we get presentations, but it's really about trying to connect the dots and looking at things holistically. And it seems like that's really been your approach, especially, with your new terminology that we have there. So we're going to move on to the next slide, and there's Mr. Penske. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that.
That's he's an acarologist, Igor Uspensky, and basically he was in Russia, and he was well known and want to publish. And he was a crime. He's not Jewish. He married a Jewish lady, and he was a custodian. Norm Cooper went there and he saw him and we found out about it. Long story short, I started petitions, lectured up to 10,000 people a year around the country. I got thousands of that. We turned it into National Pest Control, the head of immigration. They got him out. I'm not saying I did it. A bunch of people did it. And then we gave him a Courage and Science Award. And flew him to Pi Chi Omega in Miami.
And And also just sort of going back to sort of your impact, right, on art and articles and awards and everything like that. But I believe we've got something coming up with National Geographic, and I know when the slide before the slide comes. Before the slide, this slide too, is that you've been on National Geographic Nova
Correct.
as well, and then
Yeah.
you've done things for the magazine.
This is a kids magazine, and that's a drawing of me,
Great.
which I don't know where they got it from. I don't know how, but this young lady that works for the magazine did that. Her husband works for the other ends and movies and so forth. And they wanted to do something on roaches, and she suggested to her husband, myself, and that's where that came from. And it took quite a while to get a place that would agree. We had a lot of roaches. That was an actual restaurant that people seen. It's called Dr. Roach, Dr. Cockroach on Discovery Channel. I know. And not even my wife knows the restaurant, because about 4 months later, we were somewhere in a park and she said, that looks like a nice restaurant. Let's go eat over there. I said, no, we're not going there.
Somewhere else, right?
Yes.
And you've been PCT, or on the cover of PCT, you've received the Leadership Award. I think we've got that photograph coming up as well. So you've been in great company with that. The Osmond Award as well. I'm sorry, but we're just having a little bit of a delay.
So there, you notice the tie, the drawing.
Yes, I love it.
Okay, that's part of marketing. I can't stand type, but the first place a person looks, it's right
Oh,
here.
yeah, they remember.
Okay, and that's how to remember me. And I remember Jim Steckel from Columbus, Ohio, famous pest control, a great guy with Copus Sand, and one of my early breaks in the industry, said, you know, from the neck down, you don't look too impressive. I had to do something about it. So I got that bolo tie. And yeah, so I won that award, and then the John Osmond Award, and awards. They surprised me because I didn't, you just do your thing. And the scholarships that I'm alive, and there's 2 scholarships that are going for many years now. I mean, that's like
Great.
a wonderful thing. I write to every one of those students,
So great.
encourage them. And this was at the Hall of Fame, where that was given with Harry Katz on the right and Norm Cooper on the left.
Well, yeah, that's great. So I know that you are an avid fisherman, right? And we're talking a little bit about some of your hobbies, and I think it obviously fishing, but I know that hobbies intersect, career. But it's fun, right? Because you hang out with often other people that are in this industry as well. But there's some wonderful pictures of you here fishing.
Yeah, well, the one all the way on the right is for trout. Stoy Hedges heads up this getting together and Missouri Rock Bridge. I've been there about 7 or 8 times, and end up with entomologists, great guys from all over the country that are really good. And this piece of property that I own and with my son in upstate New York is about 11 miles from Trout Town, USA. That's big fishing area where I grew up and so forth. And there's a custard stand there. And the custard stand, at night in the summer, and they got spider webs all over the lights. And I walk up to it and I said, what are you doing? He says, they don't touch those. All the fly fishermen come here and read what's in there.
Cool.
And they match the hatch. They go in and buy.
It's amazing. There you go.
That's our, so fly fishermen, entomologists, you know, when
Absolutely.
when they come up. So what is a consultant? I would say pest control industry. You don't got to taste the stick with the water.
Yeah.
in the next 5 days, the termites are gonna swarm along, how many people in the office on Saturday and Sunday? How could you do that? Because the termites swarm when the forsythia is in bloom. And it's after a rain, 70 degrees. You watch the forsythia.
Mhm.
You see a weeping willow on the side of a house. That side of the house is the higher water table. Coming up with the termites.
Well connected, right?
That's right.
So looking at that
Right.
nature
Yes.
and connecting those
Yes.
dots.
But fishing is one of my hobbies. Traveling, I'm here in the Amazon with my son, with my wife, from termites in Australia. Uh, I've been fortunate to touch the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, kiss the Blarney Stone in Ireland, travel many,
Yeah.
many places.
Wonderful.
And I'm a horrible golfer, but I like it. So I'm out there. And
That's so
there's a
great.
picture, that was my newer bike. This was my first bike, actually. I have to keep models of these things. I'm like a little kid. I used to do dirt bike riding, but when I went into consulting, I said, if I break my leg, so I went into 4 wheels. And that license plate says Zadie A, which is Yiddish for Grandpa Austin. And all my grandchildren call me Zadie.
That's wonderful.
They're all taller than me now, every one of them. I think the girl may end up only being 5'10". So, that's something I'm just so proud of,
For sure.
that,
They're beautiful kids, and I see that those kids have baseball uniforms, so we
yes.
have to talk about your baseball collections. I'm going to just move the screen just a little bit
Well,
so folks can see on the wall. But you have a tremendous collection.
this could hurt a little bit. My goal in life was not to be an entomologist. It was to be a second baseman for the Brooklyn Dodgers. And my hero was Jackie Robinson.
Wow.
I was probably the only white kid with a black doll in the office in my bedroom. But I'm left-handed, and left-handers can't play second base. And I can't hit a ball. I got a weak arm, so I stopped. But those are 26 baseballs signed by Brooklyn Dodgers,
Wow.
autographed, but not Jackie Robinson,
Mhm.
because that ball was $5,000 20 years ago.
I can't imagine.
And I asked Barbara whether I could get that, and she said no. And I have the last 2 words, yes, dear. And I don't have that ball, okay? But I've got Duke Snyder and Sandy Koufax. There's a picture of all the guys that made the Hall of Fame. Or Duke Snyder when they won the World Series, at Ebbets Field. It's New York's finest. I got signed autographs of Willie Mays, Duke Snyder, and Mickey Mantle, and this hurts. Mickey Mantle's ball is worth thousands of dollars. I'm not a Yankee fan. Duke Snyder's is only about $65. Oh. But to me, it's worth more. Okay, so. Yeah, everything in the room, it's a kid's room, has some personal
Sure.
meaning. And there's a butterfly over there, yellow butterfly, uh, by my desk, which you gave me,
Oh,
because I admire
that's
you
so awesome. Thank you.
and the work that you do.
Thank you, Dr. Frishman.
Country.
And then we talked a little bit about, some of the work that you've done and that you write for magazine trade articles and books and everything. And I know you cooperate with some other folks as well, but these are just a few examples. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the Cockroach Combat Manual, because that's a big thing,
Right.
for our industry.
Yeah, we had the first one. Guy called Arthur Schwartz decided he wanted an expert. They found me. He would type and I would talk. And then it was revised with Paul Bell. I spilled my guts out in that book. that tells you, and some of my best articles are in the back, but the meat and potatoes of knowing how to do control. And that, and, that's a knee pad.
Oh, that's pretty worn.
That's one of my knee pads.
Wow,
I went through many.
that's
Okay?
incredible.
And some people would say, well, you know, the guy's got it made, a desk. And I never had a chair until I was 50 years old. I never sat down on field person,
Mhm.
okay? I always rode with a technician at least once a month, at least, just to keep out there. And that's what's in that book.
That's really wonderful. And as we start to, wrap up here,
Okay.
you have seen, I think, a lot of changes in your lifetime. We've talked about it today, even from ULA. That was a great story that I didn't know about. But do you want to just reflect back a little bit on what you think are some of these major changes that you've seen through your career?
Well, I want you to picture killing rats with 1080, like in chicken farms. And you put this stuff out there and you burn the rats, you burn the cups, you burn the gloves, everything when you're done, because that rat would take one, boom, dead. Just like that. Now, before that, when I was a kid on an old chicken farm,
Mhm.
my father and my dad would take a shovel and shovel the rat up in the air and hit it like that. All right. And I started with strychnine seeds and 300 pounds of Puss in Boots cat food and zinc and boom, like this on the dump. We close the dump off, for 24 hours. Strychnine seeds under the refrigerator. Never did so many go so far,
Mhm.
knowing so little. It's amazing we didn't kill more people. That sulfate and cookies put behind the refrigerator, and a kid died eating them, and I was at Purdue as a student when that happened with Claudia. Oh, it's horrible.
Tremendous.
We power sprayed with DDT. I remember we were supposed to power spray a barn with whitewash. All right, you're supposed to get all the cows out. We did, but there was a bull. We were afraid to take it out. It was a Holstein, they're black and white.
Mhm.
When we were done, guess what color it was? White, just from the falling down of the material. We made it smell. We hit the radiator, so they knew we were there.
Mhm.
All right. We made it smell.
Yeah.
We used oil-based insecticides.
Yeah, and I think this is a good point here, because what we're trying to do now, right, is not make it smell and really give credit to the operators to go in and fix the environmental conditions and minimize exposure and doing all of that. But it's still a very hard sell to that customer.
Oh, it's a double hard sell.
Yeah.
It's a hard sell to the public and it's a
Right.
hard sell to the technician. What is he gonna do if he's not applying
That's
pesticides?
right.
And when we talk right now about the future
Mhm.
is now.
Right.
I want you to think about this. 76% savior in time with electronic monitoring on road and bait stations, glue boards, da. Oh, yeah? The customer says, then I don't need you so much.
Need you, right? They don't see you.
Because they don't know about how do I keep it from coming back? Doing the pest proofing, all right? This is a kind of a ironic. This company, this is
Pest proof.
pest proof.
Right.
Now, the eye only sees what the brain tells it.
Mhm.
Sam Lasorda. That's Tommy Lasorda, the Dodger manager's nephew in Philadelphia, who's a pest control operator. And then a long story short is how I got the Tommy Lasorda ball.
Awesome story. It's all connected.
It's all connected, right?
It is all connected.
Right.
Well, Dr. Frishman, it has been an absolute pleasure and truly like such an honor to be here with you today. And I've learned
Thank you.
so much, to do this.
I would like to say this, the future of this industry is so bright,
Yeah.
and we are in public health. And my prediction is that when a person buys a home or goes into an apartment,
Mhm.
they're gonna take air samples, that it is pest-free. Because you can filter out with DNA
Well, they're already doing that.
what's there. That's right.
Yeah.
A zoo a half a mile away, we can pick up what's on that animal on the
Yep.
filter on the air conditioner coming
Right.
in.
It's really amazing.
And so it's so exciting of this field and how it's gonna.
It's really
expand.
developing to continue.
I wish I was 20 years old.
It's it's exciting, I'm gonna tell you. I mean, just connecting the field work, like you said, just to molecular diagnostics and what can we learn and diagnose that situation. So it's really all about making people's lives safer, right? From public health risks and also a more livable community and inside and outside.
But be aware to beware of technology.
Mhm.
That DNA can come back to bite you. If the hairs on a mouse are found in food
Oh.
from your warehouse that you're taking care of, they can match that up, that you did not do your job, and you better have paperwork that there were conducive conditions that you asked that customer to do with you, or you'll do it for him.
Good.
I spent $800 to fix this house up because of a pest problem. Pest proofing. Yellow banded millipede that got into my house. No pesticide. I took all the mulch away from around the house.
It's really, connecting again, sort of going like back to what you said, right? It's understanding the system, but it's also learning
Right.
the ecology and really putting construction and really putting it all together.
Yeah,
So-
but I still have to rely on pesticides in some situations. Yet you've got them, you work it in, with the program, and I just, I've been so fortunate to live this long, to see the evolution,
Mhm.
to be involved in it, and to say, holy cow, a kid that picked up rocks and said, wow, look at that. And at 82 and a half, I still pick up rocks, but now I put the rock back because I know that's an environment and it needs to stay in. That's the only difference.
Again, thank you, Dr. Frishman. I know we probably have some questions, so I'm gonna kick it over to Stacia to see if some of our speakers have had the opportunity to put some questions in the chat. We're running on a little bit of a delay, but she's gonna pull it up and
questions in the chat right now. But let's give people an opportunity to type them. Or if you have a question and you raise your hand, I can unmute you so you can ask your question.
They're just listening.
they're just listening about your incredible life, honestly. And I think, for folks, even though, you were talking about your age, but you do so much still and continue. I would imagine this is going to be, a forever deal. All right. I don't think we have any questions.
Okay.
But I wanted everybody to know, especially who's going to be watching this in the future, is that we have a YouTube channel. And if anybody wants to watch this video in the future, we're going to put the information up about where they can find it. And we'll definitely tweet it out and get it out in our social media page. But we also have our other speaker, legends that we've interviewed on the same website. So it's really wonderful. And if anybody wants to learn more about the different webinars that we do, because we have an interesting panel coming up this year, they can always follow us at NOLA Mosquito, which is our handle for Twitter and Facebook and all part of it. That's the evolution of it. And they can always email us at education@nola.gov. And so if somebody has a question down the road, just send us an email and we'll make sure to connect them up to you. So again, It's been an honor. Thank you so much for your time today. I know there was a lot to prepare for this.
Thank you for doing it. It forced me to think about my life.
Yeah.
If though you're so busy going forward, you don't get a chance to look back.
Go back and I think, just sort of tying this up, I'm really of the motto of you need to look at what was done, by the leaders in this industry and everybody else. Look at history so that we're not repeating, the same
But we
mistake.
need to repeat it. Let me give you an example. The Colorado Extension Bulletin
Mhm.
in 1938 said that one of the most important ways to control German roaches is to reduce the harbors by sealing the cracks.
There you go. It's there.
But when the pesticide came, they got better. Then that was,
Yeah.
I forgot. It's like jokes. There's no old jokes. It's just new. Maimonides said that mankind, this is biblical times, does not have the right to control the earth.
Get a mess of it.
Yes. Yes.
That's for sure. Everybody, thank you so much for the folks that are in the audience for taking the time to joining us today. And if anyone has additional questions, they can always just email us at NOLA.gov and we'll make sure to connect them up with you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks so much. Everybody have a great day.